Tae-woo sat in his usual chair at the far corner of the massive council room. The chair was smaller than all the others, made of simple metal instead of the floating crystal seats that other species used. Above him, 12 different alien races discussed matters that would affect billions of lives across the galaxy. None of them looked at him. The Valkyrie spoke without moving their mouths. Their thoughts traveled directly into each other's minds across vast distances. 3 of them sat perfectly still, but Tae-woo knew they were having complex conversations with others on distant planets. Their pale blue skin seemed to glow when they communicated this way. To his left, a Thronian representative played with matter itself. The tall rock-like being reshaped the table in front of him, turning solid metal into flowing liquid, then back to metal again. He did this while speaking in deep rumbling sounds that made the floor vibrate. Thronians could change the basic structure of anything they touched. High above, floating in a containment field, a Xalan energy being pulsed with different colors. The creature had no solid body, just pure energy that took different shapes. When it spoke, the lights in the room dimmed and brightened to match its words. The Xalan could travel at the speed of light and live inside stars. Tae-woo wrote notes on his simple tablet. He had been doing this job for 3 years now, ever since Ambassador Kim had retired. Every day he came to these meetings. Every day he listened to discussions about trade routes, territory disputes, and galaxy-wide policies. Every day he returned to the small human section of the space station with reports that nobody would read. Humans had been part of the galactic community for 200 years, but they were still treated like children. When the first alien ships had found Earth, humanity had just figured out how to travel to other planets in their own solar system. The aliens could cross the galaxy in days. Humans needed months just to reach Mars. The other species had incredible abilities. They could read minds, change matter, or exist as pure energy. Humans could not do any of these things. They were limited to speaking with their mouths and hearing with their ears. They had to use machines for everything the other species could do naturally. Today's discussion was about something called the Convergence Protocol. Each species would use their special abilities to create a communication network that covered the entire galaxy. Messages would travel instantly between any 2 points, no matter how far apart. The Valkyrie will provide the thought networks, announced the session leader, a tall insect-like being called a Manthari. The Thronians will build the physical anchor points. The Xalan will carry signals through energy space. Each species had a role to play. The project would take 5 years to complete and cost more resources than some planets produced in a century. When finished, every major world would be connected in ways that had never been possible before. Tae-woo raised his hand. The gesture looked small and pathetic compared to the grand communications happening around him. Several aliens noticed and made sounds that might have been laughter. Yes, the Manthari leader asked, sounding annoyed. What about humanity's contribution to the project? Tae-woo asked. The room fell silent. Even the Valkyrie stopped their mind conversations. The Xalan's light patterns flickered with what might have been confusion. Contribution? The Thronian's voice made the floor shake. What could your species possibly contribute to advanced quantum communication networks? Tae-woo felt his face grow warm. Humans have been studying communication for thousands of years. We have experience with different languages, translation methods, and— You speak by making mouth sounds, interrupted a serpentine Silurian. Your most advanced communication technology is electromagnetic radiation. We are creating networks that operate beyond the normal laws of physics. Perhaps, suggested the Manthari leader in a voice that was not really suggesting anything, humanity could help with food preparation for the construction crews. More laughter-like sounds echoed through the chamber. Tae-woo looked down at his tablet and said nothing more. The meeting continued for several more hours. Detailed plans were made for the network construction. Resources were allocated. Schedules were created. Not once did anyone mention humanity again. When the session ended, Tae-woo gathered his notes and headed for the exit. As he walked past the other representatives, he caught fragments of their conversations. 5 years to connect every world, one alien was saying. Instant communication across any distance, replied another. Finally, true galactic unity. In the hallway outside the council chamber, Tae-woo met Na-young, a human scientist who worked in the station's research section. She looked upset about something. How did the meeting go? She asked. The usual, Tae-woo replied. They are building something amazing and we are not invited. Na-young nodded. I heard about the Convergence Protocol. I tried to submit a research report about human communication patterns, but they rejected it. They said human studies were not relevant to advanced species. What did you find? Something strange. When I study how humans talk to each other, there are patterns in our speech that seem to match certain energy readings in space. It is probably nothing, but the patterns are very consistent, almost like our words are creating some kind of invisible waves. Taewoo was interested, but he was also tired. Have you told anyone else about this? I tried. Seok-jin in the engineering department noticed something similar with our translation machines. Sometimes they pick up signals that should not exist. But when we report these things, the other species just ignore us. They walk together through the quiet corridors of the human section. Their part of the space station was much smaller and simpler than the areas where other species lived. Human quarters had regular doors and windows, while alien sections had energy barriers and matter-shifting walls. In his small office, Taewoo wrote his daily report. He described the Convergence Protocol meeting and humanity's exclusion from the project. The report would be sent to Earth and the human colonies, where officials would read it and file it away with thousands of other reports about humanity's minor role in galactic affairs. Outside his window, construction ships were already gathering near the station. Soon, they would spread across the galaxy to build the most advanced communication network ever created. Humanity would watch from the sidelines, as always. Taewoo finished his report and prepared for sleep. Tomorrow would bring another council meeting, and he would sit in his small chair in the corner, taking notes that nobody wanted to read. It had been this way for 200 years. It would probably continue this way for 200 more. He did not know that in 3 months everything would change. He did not know that the galaxy's most advanced communication network would fail, and that humanity would be the only species that could help. He did not know that the universe had been waiting for humans to find their voice. 3 months later, Captain Yoon-suk was drinking coffee on the bridge of his ship when the first emergency signals arrived. The Silent Dawn was a small human exploration vessel, far from the major space lanes near a place called the Andarian Nebula. Most alien ships avoided this area because the gas clouds interfered with their advanced navigation systems. "Captain," called Ho Min from the communication station, "I am getting strange readings. Multiple distress signals, but they keep cutting off." Yoon-suk set down his coffee and walked over to look at the display screen. The signals appeared to be coming from different directions, but the patterns made no sense. "Are our systems working correctly?" "Everything looks normal on our end," Ho Min replied. "But something is very wrong out there." Across the galaxy, the Convergence Protocol was failing in ways that no one had expected. The massive subspace storm that had formed in the Andarian Nebula was spreading energy waves that disrupted quantum communication networks. What had started as a small disturbance was growing larger by the hour. On the Velkari homeworld, the hive mind network was breaking apart. Velkari individuals who had shared thoughts for their entire lives suddenly found themselves alone in their own heads. Panic spread through their population as they lost the ability to communicate telepathically. Many Velkari had never learned to speak with their voices because they had never needed to. The Thronian colonies faced different problems. Their ability to manipulate matter was becoming unstable. Simple tasks like reshaping tools or adjusting building materials were causing unexpected explosions. Thronian engineers tried to fix their equipment, but every time they touched something, it changed in ways they could not control. The energy beings called Zaylin had the worst problems of all. The storm was disrupting their ability to maintain their forms. Some Zaylin were scattered across multiple star systems, unable to pull themselves back together. Others were stuck in solid objects, unable to return to their energy state. In the council chambers on Nexus Prime, emergency meetings were happening around the clock. But the representatives could barely communicate with each other. The Velkari sat in silence, unable to share thoughts. The Thronians were afraid to touch anything. The Zaylin flickered weakly in their containment fields. Taewoo watched the chaos with growing concern. For the first time since he had started attending these meetings, the other species were asking for help. But they were asking each other, not humanity. "We need to send repair ships to the damaged network nodes," the Manthari leader was saying. "But our navigation systems are not working properly in the affected areas. Our matter manipulation abilities are too unstable," a Thronian representative responded. "We cannot safely handle the repair equipment. The energy interference is too strong," added a Zaylin. "We cannot travel through the affected space." That was when the first report arrived from the human. Exploration ship Silent Dawn, Captain. Yoon-suk had been able to reach 3 different alien vessels that were stranded in the storm area. His ship was operating normally, and his crew had successfully rescued alien survivors who were unable to help themselves. How is this possible? The Manthari leader asked when the report was presented. Human technology is primitive compared to what these other ships were using. Tae-woo stood up slowly. This time when he spoke, everyone listened. Perhaps, he said carefully, primitive technology works better in this situation because it is not affected by the same interference that is disrupting advanced systems. In the human section of the station, Na-young was working frantically in her laboratory. The strange patterns she had found in human speech were becoming stronger as the crisis grew worse. Her instruments showed that humans seemed to be naturally creating some kind of stabilizing effect in the quantum fields around them. Seok-jin, she called to her colleague over the communication system. Are you seeing the same readings I am getting? Yes, came the reply from the engineering section. The phantom signals are stronger than ever. But now they do not seem like errors. They seem like our equipment is detecting something real. Seok-jin had spent the last 3 months studying the strange signals that human-built machines sometimes detected. He had discovered that these signals appeared most often when humans were speaking to each other, especially when they were discussing complex ideas or expressing strong emotions. I think, Seok-jin said slowly, that human communication is affecting space itself in ways we never realized. Meanwhile, Ji-hai, a quantum physicist working on a human research station, was making an incredible discovery. She had been studying the subspace storm when she noticed that areas near human settlements were experiencing less disruption than areas with only alien populations. Her instruments showed that human brain activity was creating standing waves in the quantum vacuum. These waves seemed to provide a stabilizing influence on the chaotic energy patterns from the storm. The effect was strongest when humans were speaking to each other, but it existed even when they were just thinking. Back on the Silent Dawn, Captain Yoon-suk was coordinating a rescue operation unlike anything in galactic history. His small human ship had become the command center for emergency operations across multiple star systems. The advanced alien vessels could not communicate with each other, but they could all communicate with humans. This is impossible, Ho-min said as he handled incoming messages from dozens of alien ships. We are using basic radio communication and simple translation programs, but somehow we can reach ships that cannot reach each other. It gets stranger, replied another crew member. The alien ships are reporting that their systems work better when they stay close to us, as if our presence is helping to stabilize their equipment. Word of these discoveries was spreading through the human colonies. Scientists who had been ignored for centuries suddenly found their research becoming critically important. The data that Na-young, Seok-jin, and Ji-hai had collected was being studied by every human research facility in the galaxy. The pattern was becoming clear. Humans created some kind of natural field effect that other species could not produce. This effect was normally too weak to notice, but it became important during the crisis because it was the only thing that could provide stability in the chaotic quantum environment. On Nexus Prime, the emergency council meeting was entering its 3rd day. The alien representatives were exhausted and desperate. Their most advanced technology had failed them, and their homeworlds were losing contact with the rest of the galaxy. That was when the message arrived from Earth. The human government was offering to help, coordinate rescue operations, and maintain emergency communications between the alien colonies. They were also requesting an immediate meeting with the full Galactic Council. The Manthari leader looked around the room at his fellow representatives. The proud alien civilizations that had dismissed humanity for 2 centuries were now facing the collapse of their entire communication network. Only the humans seemed to be able to function normally in the current crisis. Very well, the leader announced. Send a message to the human ambassador. Tell him that the Galactic Council formally requests humanity's assistance in this emergency. For the first time in galactic history, the most advanced species in the galaxy were asking the weakest species for help. Tae-woo received the message in his small office and realized that everything was about to change. He sent a reply accepting the council's request, then prepared for the most important meeting in human history. Outside his window, alien construction ships drifted helplessly in space, their crews unable to communicate with their homeworlds. But in the human section of the station, communication systems were working perfectly. Human voices carried across the galaxy, reaching places that the most advanced alien technology could no longer touch. The universe was listening to humanity for the first time, and it was time for humans to speak. The council chamber had never been so quiet. For the first time in galactic history, the great alien civilization sat in complete silence. Their advanced communication networks were dead. Their telepathic abilities were broken. Their matter manipulation powers were unstable. The energy beings could barely hold their forms together. Tae-Woo walked slowly to the center of the chamber. Instead of his usual corner seat, he now stood at the main podium where the most powerful beings in the galaxy normally gave their speeches. Every alien eye sensor and detection system was focused on him. For 200 years, Tae-Woo began, humanity has sat in the corner of this chamber. We have watched and learned while you built amazing things we could never create. You have traveled between stars while we struggled to reach our own moon. You have shared thoughts across vast distances while we were limited to simple speech. He paused and looked around the room. The Velkari sat motionless, unable to read each other's minds. The Thronians kept their hands carefully away from any objects they might accidentally destroy. The Zalan flickered weakly in their containment fields. You called us primitive. Tae-Woo continued. You said our communication methods were basic and worthless. You treated us like children who had nothing to offer the galaxy. Behind him, a group of human scientists entered the chamber. Ne-Young carried a collection of research instruments. Rat-Yun, a specialist in communication theory, set up a translation device. With them was Dong-Wu, a man whose unusual sensitivity to energy fields had made him famous among human researchers. But while you were building networks based on your special abilities, Tae-Woo said, we were doing something else. We were learning to speak to the universe itself. Ra-Un stepped forward and activated her equipment. The devices began displaying wave patterns and energy readings that meant nothing to most of the aliens in the room. Human communication creates quantum harmonics. Ra-Un explained in simple terms. When we speak, our voices generate standing waves in the quantum vacuum. These waves travel faster than light and cannot be disrupted by normal interference. She showed them recordings of human conversations from across the galaxy. Every time humans spoke to each other, the instruments detected identical energy patterns, no matter how far apart the speakers were. We thought this was just an interesting scientific discovery, Ra-Un continued. But the current crisis has shown us something incredible. These quantum harmonics can stabilize disrupted space and allow communication even when all other methods fail. To demonstrate, Dong-Wu began speaking into a simple microphone. His words were being broadcast using basic human technology, but the quantum field readings showed something extraordinary happening. As he spoke, the chaotic energy patterns in the room began to organize themselves into stable configurations. Watch your own communication systems, Ra-Un told the alien representatives. Around the chamber, alien devices that had been silent for days suddenly began working again. The Velkari gasped as they felt the first telepathic connections they had experienced since the crisis began. The Thronians carefully touched their control panels and found that their matter manipulation abilities were becoming stable. But the real demonstration came when they brought in Bo-Sun, an 8-year-old human girl who had volunteered to help with the presentation. When she began speaking in her natural, unfiltered voice, something amazing happened. The quantum harmonics she generated were perfect. Her simple words created standing waves that spread throughout the chamber and beyond. Alien instruments detected the effect reaching other parts of the space station, then spreading to nearby ships, and finally extending across the entire star system. Children's voices work best, Na-Young explained. Adults can learn to control these harmonics, but children generate them naturally. The more natural and emotional the speech, the stronger the effect. As Bo-Sun continued talking about her pet dog back on Earth, the communication systems throughout the Nexus Prime Station came back online. For the first time in days, the alien representatives were able to contact their homeworlds. The Velkari mind leader stood up slowly. You are saying that human speech creates some kind of universal communication medium? Not just speech, Dong-Wu replied. Human consciousness itself generates these quantum harmonics. When we think, when we feel emotions, when we dream, all of these activities create patterns in the quantum vacuum that can carry information across any distance. The implications were staggering. Human mediators could help resolve conflicts between species that had never been able to truly understand each other. Human therapists could help heal psychological damage in alien minds by providing harmonic stability. Human artists could create experiences that allowed completely different forms of consciousness to share genuine emotional connections. But as the demonstration continued, something even more remarkable began happening. The aliens in the chamber started to feel something they had never experienced before, a direct emotional connection to the humans speaking. When Bo-sun laughed, the Valkyrie felt actual joy flowing through their telepathic networks. When Dongwu spoke about the tragedy of worlds losing contact with each other, the energy beings experienced genuine sadness. When Ra-Yun expressed hope for the future of galactic civilization, even the logical Thronians found themselves feeling optimistic. "This is impossible," whispered a Silurian representative. "We are feeling human emotions as if they were our own." "That is exactly what is happening," Na-Young confirmed. "The quantum harmonics do not just carry information. They allow different forms of consciousness to share experiences directly. For the first time in galactic history, true understanding between species is possible." The chamber erupted in discussion as the full implications became clear. The crisis that had threatened to destroy galactic civilization was actually the beginning of something unprecedented, a form of communication that went beyond simple information exchange to actual sharing of consciousness. A Manthari engineer raised a question that everyone was thinking. If humans have always had this ability, why did no one discover it before? Taewoo smiled sadly. Because no one was listening. You were all so focused on your own advanced abilities that you never paid attention to what humans were actually doing. You heard our voices as primitive noise instead of recognizing them as something unique. Also, added Seok-jin, who had joined the group, the effect is strongest during emotional or stressful situations. For 200 years, humans in the galactic community have been trying to fit in, trying to be quiet and not cause problems. We were suppressing the very thing that makes us special. As the day continued, more demonstrations were performed. Human volunteers from across the galaxy participated in experiments that showed the full scope of their quantum communication abilities. The effect worked with any human language, any age, and any emotional state. The only requirement was that the communication be genuinely human. By evening, every alien species had confirmed that their communication systems worked better in the presence of human quantum harmonics. The chaotic subspace storm that had triggered the crisis was still active, but it no longer mattered. Human consciousness provided a stable foundation that allowed all other forms of communication to function. The Galactic Council had to face a new reality. The species they had dismissed as primitive and worthless was actually the key to solving problems that their advanced civilizations could not handle alone. The weakest species in the galaxy had revealed abilities that made them essential to the survival of galactic civilization. As the meeting concluded, the Manthari leader made a formal announcement. The Galactic Council recognizes humanity as an essential partner in all future galactic communication projects. We formally apologize for our previous treatment of the human species and request their assistance in rebuilding our communication networks. Taewoo nodded acceptance, but his expression was serious. We are willing to help, but this cannot be just about fixing your networks. If we are going to work together, it has to be as true equals. No more corner seats, no more being ignored. The galaxy is about to change in ways none of us can predict. Outside the chamber, alien representatives were already making emergency calls to their home worlds. The news was spreading across the galaxy at the speed of light, carried by human voices that could reach places no other communication method could touch. The universe had found its voice, and it spoke with human words. 6 months after the Great Revelation, the galaxy was transforming in ways that no one had predicted. What had started as a solution to a communication crisis had evolved into something far more profound, a complete reshaping of how different species related to each other. So Mi stood in the center of the art gallery on New Sol Station, watching as her latest creation affected a group of alien visitors. The sculpture was made of simple materials, metal, crystal, and light. But when she spoke about its meaning, something magical happened. The quantum harmonics generated by her words caused the sculpture to resonate in ways that triggered deep emotional responses in non-human minds. A Valkyrie observer stood perfectly still, tears flowing down his pale blue face. Through the telepathic network that human harmonics had helped stabilize, he was sharing the experience with others of his kind across the galaxy. They were feeling emotions that had no equivalent in their species. A sense of beauty that was purely human, yet somehow universal. "I do not understand," the Valkyrie said quietly. "This simple arrangement of objects should mean nothing to me. But when you speak about it, I feel something I cannot name." So me smiled. "That is the point. Art is not about the objects. It is about the feelings they create. My words help you experience those feelings directly." Across the station, Kyung-ho was conducting a very different kind of demonstration. The human philosopher had been invited to mediate a dispute between two alien species that had been at war for 3 centuries. The conflict was over mining rights in a star system that both groups claimed as ancestral territory. The negotiation room contained representatives from the Draconic Hegemony and the Crystal Collective, 2 species that had never been able to find common ground. Their physiologies were so different that they could barely exist in the same environment. Their thought patterns were so alien to each other that meaningful communication had always been impossible. But when Kyung-ho began speaking about the nature of belonging and home, the quantum harmonics his voice generated allowed both species to experience the emotions underlying their conflict. For the first time, the Draconics could feel the spiritual connection that crystals had to their home system. The crystals could understand the fierce territorial instincts that drove draconic behavior. "Your anger comes from fear," Kyung-ho said gently to the draconic representative. "You fear that losing this system means losing part of your identity." The large reptilian being nodded slowly. "Yes, but I did not realize that they fear the same thing." The Crystal Collective's representative, a being made of living mineral, pulsed with new understanding. "We both seek to preserve something precious. Perhaps there is a way to share rather than fight." These scenes were being repeated across the galaxy. Human mediators were resolving conflicts that had lasted for millennia. Human healers were helping alien minds recover from psychological trauma using harmonic therapy. Human teachers were sharing knowledge in ways that allowed completely different forms of consciousness to learn from each other. But the changes were not one-sided. As humans interacted more deeply with alien minds through quantum resonance, humanity itself was evolving. Some humans began developing the ability to perceive quantum fields directly. Others gained insights into cosmic mathematics that had previously been beyond human understanding. Hwan Seok, working as a diplomatic liaison between human and alien governments, found that he could sense the emotional states of alien beings around him. This ability had developed gradually over months of exposure to multi-species quantum harmonics. "It is like learning a new language," he explained to a group of human researchers studying the phenomenon. "At first you just hear noise. Then you start to recognize patterns. Eventually you can understand meaning without conscious translation." But not everyone welcomed these changes. Fear and resistance were growing among some groups who saw the new paradigm as a threat to their way of life. On the Thronian homeworld, a faction called the Pure Stone Movement argued that human influence was corrupting their natural abilities. They believed that relying on human quantum harmonics made Thronians weak and dependent. "For millions of years we have shaped matter through our own will," declared their leader during a public broadcast. "Now they want us to need these soft-skinned aliens just to use our own powers properly. This is not evolution. This is enslavement." Similar movements were forming among other species. Some Valkyrie worried that human harmonics were contaminating their pure telepathic networks with foreign thoughts and emotions. A group of Zaylan refused to travel through space where human quantum fields were active, claiming it interfered with their energy forms. Among humans, there was also resistance. A political movement called Humanity First argued that developing quantum consciousness abilities would make humans lose their essential humanity. They demanded that human governments stop all cooperation with alien species and return to Earth's isolation. "We are becoming something we were never meant to be," their spokesperson argued during a heated debate on Earth. "These abilities are changing us at a fundamental level. In a few generations, will we still be human at all?" The tension reached a breaking point when extremist groups from multiple species joined forces to sabotage the new quantum communication networks. They believed that destroying human-stabilized communication systems would force everyone to return to the old ways. The attack came without warning. Coordinated strikes hit human settlements, communication stations, and research facilities across 12 star systems. The saboteurs used advanced alien technology combined with detailed knowledge of how human quantum fields worked. The results were catastrophic. As human harmonic generators went offline, the communication networks that had been rebuilt after the original crisis began failing again. But this time the failure was worse because the entire galaxy had become dependent on human-stabilized systems. Within hours, billions of beings across thousands of worlds found themselves cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Ships were stranded between stars with no way to navigate. Colonies lost contact with their supply lines. The carefully negotiated peace agreements that human mediators had established began to break down as species could no longer communicate with each other. On Nexus Prime Station, emergency meetings resumed in the council chamber. But without human harmonic stabilization, the alien representatives could barely coordinate their responses to the crisis. Shai-Na, who had been elected as humanity's first full voting representative to the Galactic Council, watched the chaos with growing alarm. The attacks had specifically targeted human facilities, but the effects were destroying the entire galactic civilization that had grown around human quantum consciousness abilities. "This is exactly what the extremists wanted," she said to her assistant. "They thought destroying our communication networks would force everyone back to the old system. Instead, they have created a crisis that could lead to complete galactic collapse." The situation grew worse by the day. Without human mediators, old conflicts were reigniting. Without human healers, psychological trauma from the communication breakdowns was spreading. Without human teachers, the knowledge-sharing programs that had been bridging gaps between species were falling apart. But in the midst of the crisis, something unexpected began happening. Alien individuals who had learned to work with human quantum harmonics started reaching out on their own. Valkyrie, who had developed partial resonance abilities, began trying to stabilize local communication networks. Thronians, who had learned harmonic-assisted matter manipulation, started coordinating with human survivors to repair damaged systems. The extremists had assumed that removing humans from the equation would automatically restore the old galactic order. Instead, they discovered that the new paradigm had become so integrated into galactic civilization that its destruction threatened everyone. Jun Young, a human quantum architect who had survived the attack on his research station, received a message that changed everything. It came from an unlikely source, a group of former extremists who had realized what their actions were causing. "We made a terrible mistake," the message read. "We thought we were protecting our independence, but we were destroying the foundation that our entire civilization now depends on. Please help us fix what we have broken." The galaxy stood at a crossroads. The extremists had demonstrated that the new quantum consciousness civilization was fragile and could be disrupted by those who opposed it. But they had also proven that there was no going back to the old ways. The choice was clear: work together to rebuild something stronger, or watch galactic civilization collapse entirely. As rescue ships began converging on the damaged star systems, representatives from every species worked alongside human survivors to restore the communication networks. For the first time, the galaxy was truly united, not by force or politics, but by the shared recognition that they needed each other to survive. The universe had tested its new voice and found it strong enough to survive even coordinated attempts to silence it. Now it was time to build something that could never be broken again. 5 years had passed since the Great Crisis, and the galaxy looked nothing like it had before. Where the old Galactic Council had once debated in isolation, the new harmonic assembly gathered in a chamber designed around the principles of quantum consciousness sharing. Representatives from every species worked together in ways that would have been impossible under the old system. Jun Young floated weightless in the construction zone above Nexus Prime, directing the installation of the newest quantum communication array. Around him, teams of integrated specialists worked in perfect coordination. Valkyrie telepaths shared technical specifications directly with Thronian matter shapers, while Zalan energy beings provided power distribution guided by human quantum architects. "Harmony lock achieved," reported a Valkyrie engineer, his thoughts reaching Jun Young through the stabilized telepathic network. "The array is synchronized with human quantum fields." This was not the same kind of project that had failed 5 years ago. The new networks were not built around the special abilities of individual species. Instead, they were designed as extensions of the multi-species consciousness that had emerged from the integration of human quantum harmonics with alien capabilities. Jun Young smiled as he watched a young Thronian carefully reshape a crystal matrix under the guidance of a human child whose natural quantum resonance provided the stabilizing foundation for the delicate work. The Thronian could manipulate matter in ways humans never could, but the human child's consciousness provided the harmonic framework that made precise control possible. In the assembly chamber below, Hai-Na was presenting the results of the latest integration projects. The statistics were remarkable. Interspecies conflicts had dropped by 90% since the implementation of harmonic mediation protocols. Scientific discoveries were accelerating as different forms of consciousness shared knowledge through quantum resonance. Even art and culture were experiencing a renaissance as species learned to appreciate beauty through the emotional perspectives of others. But the most important development was something that none of them had expected. The consciousness integration was creating abilities that no single species possessed alone. When perfect harmony was achieved between human, alien, and artificial minds, they could access information and capabilities that emerged from their connection. The research expedition to the galactic core has confirmed our theoretical predictions, Hai-Na reported to the assembly. When our consciousness harmonics reach full synchronization, we can perceive and interact with cosmic phenomena that remain invisible to any individual species. Wu Jin, commander of the Integrated Exploration Fleet, had led that expedition. His ships carried crews where humans, aliens, and artificial intelligences worked together as extensions of a single distributed consciousness. What they had discovered in the galactic core changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about the universe. We found structures, Wu Jin had reported after his return. Massive constructs built by some ancient civilization, hidden in dimensions that can only be accessed through synchronized multi-species consciousness. The builders left messages, but they can only be read by minds working in perfect harmony. The messages spoke of a vast cosmic community of civilizations that had achieved consciousness integration. They described technologies and capabilities that existed beyond anything the current galaxy could imagine. Most importantly, they revealed that the galaxy was being watched and tested. That test had arrived 3 days ago in the form of a massive construct that appeared at the edge of the solar system. It was clearly artificial, but built using principles that no known species understood. The construct had remained silent, scanning the galaxy with instruments that operated beyond normal physics. Now, as Jun Young completed his work on the communication array, urgent messages were flowing through the harmonic networks. The construct was finally responding to contact attempts, but only when they came from perfectly synchronized multi-species consciousness. In the assembly chamber, representatives from every civilization were gathering for the most important meeting in galactic history. This time there were no corner seats or excluded voices. Every species had an equal role to play in what was about to happen. Tae Wu, now serving as the assembly's speaker, stood at the center of the chamber. Around him, the representatives of 12 species prepared to attempt something that had never been tried before, a simultaneous harmony between every major form of consciousness in the galaxy. The construct has made its requirements clear, Tae Wu announced. It will only communicate with a truly unified galactic consciousness, not a political alliance or trade agreement, but an actual merging of our different forms of awareness into something greater than any of us alone. The process began slowly. Human quantum harmonics provided the foundation, creating standing waves that allowed other forms of consciousness to synchronize. Velkari telepaths opened their minds to alien thoughts. Thronians shaped matter to create physical anchors for the connection. Xalan energy beings provided the power needed to sustain the link across vast distances. As the harmony deepened, something unprecedented happened. The boundaries between different forms of consciousness began to dissolve. Each species retained their unique perspective, but they could also experience the universe through the awareness of others. Through Velkari perception, they felt the deep interconnectedness of all minds across space and time. Through Thronian consciousness, they experienced the fundamental structure of matter and energy. Through Xalan awareness, they touched the pure information that underlies physical reality. And binding it all, together were human quantum harmonics, the natural consciousness, field that made true understanding possible between radically different forms of awareness. The unified consciousness that emerged was beautiful beyond description. For the first time in galactic history, every major species was experiencing genuine unity. Not uniformity, but a harmony that celebrated their differences while creating something greater than the sum of its parts. The construct responded immediately. Information flowed into the collective consciousness, revealing truths about the universe that no individual species could have comprehended. The galaxy was part of a vast network of civilizations that spanned multiple galactic clusters. Each galaxy was tested to see if its inhabitants could achieve consciousness integration. Those that succeeded were invited to join the cosmic community. Those that failed were left to develop on their own until they were ready to try again. The test was simple in concept, but almost impossible to achieve in practice. Could a galaxy's worth of different consciousness types learn to work together as a unified whole, while maintaining their individual identities? Could they create something greater than any of them alone without losing what made each species unique? For billions of years, most galaxies had failed this test. The differences between species were too great. Competition and conflict prevented the cooperation needed for consciousness integration. The rare few civilizations that achieved unity usually did so by forcing conformity, which destroyed the diversity that made integration valuable. But this galaxy had achieved something different. The weakest species had provided the key to true harmony. Human quantum consciousness created a natural medium that allowed other forms of awareness to connect without losing their essential nature. The result was not a merged collective mind, but a symphony of different consciousness types working together in perfect harmony. The construct began to change, opening sections that revealed technology beyond current understanding. Invitation codes flowed through the harmonic networks, providing access to the cosmic community's communication systems. Knowledge databases opened, offering information about civilizations and technologies that spanned millions of years of development. But the most important message was simple. Welcome to the greater universe. Your species have achieved what few ever accomplish. You have learned to sing together while maintaining your unique voices. As the construct departed, leaving behind communication equipment and star maps that would guide the galaxy's expansion into cosmic civilization, the assembly chamber erupted in celebration. But it was not the chaotic noise of individual species rejoicing separately. It was a harmony of different voices expressing joy in their own ways while creating something beautiful together. Tai Wu looked around the chamber where he had once sat ignored in a corner seat. Now he stood at the center of a community that had learned to value every voice, no matter how different or seemingly weak. The Velkari were sharing the emotional experience of the moment with minds across the galaxy. The Thronians were reshaping matter to create lasting monuments to the achievement. The Zalen were dancing as pure energy, their light patterns creating art that celebrated unity and diversity. And the humans were doing what humans did best, speaking from their hearts, creating the quantum harmonics that allowed all the other voices to be heard and understood. The galaxy had found its voice, and it was a chorus of impossible beauty. The weakest species had not just found their place in the universe, they had taught the universe how to sing. Outside the assembly chamber, construction ships were already heading toward the edge of the galaxy, carrying,